This is the BBC.
Dear brothers and sisters, all are welcome here at the Confessions podcast, whether saint or sinner.
Ha ha! Hello, and welcome to another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. Did that sound like full sincerity?
Yep.
I think
You didn't have me for a minute.
probably did just a little bit. Anyway, here comes another Confessions podcast with Joe and Bobby.
Yes, indeed. Sorry, that was a dramatic pause there that I just inserted.
Yes, it was very effective, I thought.
This week's confession collection includes the following. So we have Elaine's story, the first time ever I saw your trace. We have Craig's tale, I get the cheatest feeling. Julie's fairy tale of Old York, and a classic confession from the crypt featuring a jammy prank which causes some rather unwelcome swelling.
But first we start with Giorgio's confession, you stole the scrum from my heart.
Please be seated.
Dear Father Simon and the Collective of Justice, for the past 26 years, a group of Welsh rugby fans have meticulously organised a 3-day trip by car for 12 people to support the Welsh rugby team on their quest to beat Scotland. This trip would happen every 2 years and would start on the Thursday before the match on the Saturday, with an 8-hour journey that would take the supporters to a small village outside Edinburgh. This confession takes place on my very first trip with this hardy bunch, when I was informed that, being the Italian VIP guest, I would share the room with Mike. Alan was the man to organise everything. He organised the times, the B&B, tickets to Murrayfield, all planned down to the last detail, including who would share a bedroom at the B&B. We'd head off at precisely 7 a.m, and after a couple of comfort breaks, at 2:30, we would arrive at the B&B. As soon as we settled in, the 6 barmaids, 2 from each pub, of the only 3 pubs in the village, would join us, as they had done every time the Welsh arrived, to exchange welcomes and pleasantries before they went to work. This paragraph is underwritten, or it's been edited. We would see them extensively for the next 3 evenings. There you go. What does that mean? On our 3-pub crawl, and here the story begins. Where is Wyn? A barmaid asked organiser Alan. Now at this point I need to explain that Wyn, one of the regulars from the group, had not been able to join us due to the fact that when he told his wife he was going to Scotland for the rugby, she replied, "No, you're not, the back room needs painting." And that was that. Hence, Wyn's ticket had become available, and now it was mine. And so that's how I'm part of this story, says Giorgio. Yeah, where is Wyn? Another barmaid asked. At which point, Alan's face theatrically dropped, and he became sombre, almost emotional, and said, "Wyn is no more." None of us knew he was going to say this. And then one of the others in the party said, "Yeah, heart failure." Alan nodded in disbelief. "OMG, you're kidding me," was the unanimous exclamation from the barmaids. They couldn't believe it. Good old Wyn, happy-go-lucky, larger-than-life Wyn, dead. Quickly recovering, Alan pointed at me and declared the good news. Giorgio here is the recipient of Wyn's heart, as Wyn was a donor. So to all intents and purposes, Wyn is still with us. Good news. I tapped my heart, and then I put my hands together in grateful thanks, picking up where I think I was being led. The barmaids were scarcely taking this in, but Alan wasn't finished yet. Not only that, he continued, on match day at Murrayfield, through the generosity of the Scottish Rugby Union executives, Wyn's ashes will be scattered live on television just before the match starts. After more condolences and hugs, the barmaids left to go to work. And we next saw them the following evening, where, after a few drinks, one of the boys shouted, "This is for Wyn!" With our glasses raised, we cheered to Wyn, and then others joined in. Many bereavement beverages were bought for us. Lovely gestures, you have to agree. As the booze took hold, I overheard storyteller Alan convincing one of the barmaids that I, Giorgio, was one of the original members of the 3 tenors, as in Pavarotti, Domingo and Carreras. But originally there were 4, and our group was called the 3 tenors and a 5er because I was the smallest. Anyway, that's what happens when the drink flows. Anyway, everyone was having a good time. In the end, the Welsh won the match. Before which there was obviously no scattering of the very much still alive Wyn's ashes. And when we later saw the barmaids, Alan brushed this off by saying, No, it was too windy. There are strict rules about scattering of ashes at rugby matches. The Scottish Parliament have said you can't do it if it's above factor 5.
40 knots.
40 knots, indeed.
Okay.
So clearly, Father Simon and the collective, I seek forgiveness on behalf of Alan and for myself because we never actually told the barmaids the truth. And so to this day, we think that Wyn's dead and that I have his heart. But if they're listening, can I just tell them that Wyn has his own heart, I have my own heart, and Wyn is still alive. Anyway, we also ask forgiveness from Wyn for condemning him to an early grave. And that's from Giorgio. Well, that's very interesting. I wonder if Giorgio should have told us quite as much about the hospitality that was being offered. But anyway, I imagine if Wyn's wife is listening, she's thinking, I did exactly the right thing in saying you can't go to Scotland. Anyway, Joe's going first.
This is a good story. Really good story. I enjoyed listening to this one a lot. I'm going to forgive, had the ashes been scattered, if they'd actually gone through with the whole ceremony and there'd been some ritualistic scattering of ashes, then that would have been too bad. So I wouldn't have forgiven then. But this is just getting carried away, and it's quite funny. Getting carried away, taking a joke, just one step too far, but it's okay. No, I was going to say nobody died. I mean, they didn't die, so it's fine. Wyn didn't die, so it's okay. It's fine. Forgive him. It's all right.
Wyn is still alive. We're led to believe. Bobby Pryor.
I think it's classic victimless crime. This is the kind of jest that I really, really love. And also what I like is as soon as someone says it, everyone has to join in and keep it up. It's like keepy-uppy of an idea. Does that make sense? I know it's not football, it's rugby, but I love the way they run with it. And also Wyn's wife, because I felt a bit sorry for Wyn keeping her home for the DIY, because you just don't do things like that. However, I realise now, of course, it wasn't the DIY of the back bedroom, was it? It's because he got involved with too many barmaids in Scotland that she thought, I need to keep you safe and protect you, because, you don't want too much attention, do you?
Yeah. I mean, the only victim, I suppose, would be the barmaids who still believe that Wyn is dead and that Giorgio has his heart.
Well, but there's no real suffering, is it? I mean, there's no...
No, they don't care that much.
No, it's fine. It'd be fine. And it'd be nice if he turned up the year later. There you go.
Can you imagine? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. It's not the end, is it?
The Confessions Podcast.
Father Simon, the Forgiving Collective. In the late 60s, I was 11 and was growing up in the west of Scotland. Through more luck than anything else, I managed to pass an exam called the Qualifier, and I was sent to an academy with a fine reputation for turning out great students. I was genuinely excited about going to such a bastion of educational excellence, but once I got there I realised it was probably not for me. All they wanted to teach you was stuffy things like history, geography and Latin. What is the use of Latin to anybody? I had no interest in being a lawyer or a priest. The thought of going around wearing a wig or a frock all day did not appeal to me, so I gave up trying to learn the subject very early on. In the second year, you were allowed to switch to French, if you weren't a Latin fan, which I wasn't. Couldn't see what the point of French was either, to be perfectly honest, but I figured it must be easier than Latin, so I opted for that. Hello to all French teachers, by the way. I found myself in Miss Dubois' French class. She was a terrific teacher and tried really hard to teach us all about this beautiful language and culture. But I still struggled to learn anything about the subject and was much more interested in the news that Cream were breaking up and that there was a new Led Zeppelin album coming out soon. At the end of the year, it was time for our annual exams. Alarm bells started to ring as the tests approached. Then I remembered what a bloke in the playground had told me, that if the school somehow lost your exam paper, then you'd be awarded the county average for that particular subject. Is this true? The day the French test arrived, I did my best, but as most of the pages were still blank when I finished, I knew I hadn't done well. I decided my best option would be to take my chances and actually not hand my paper in at all. As I was always sat at the back of the class, it was usually my job to collect up everyone's papers or books. I simply slipped my exam paper into my briefcase, collected the rest, and handed all the papers to Miss Dubois. I thought I'd got away with it. After a lovely summer break, it was back to the third year. In our first French lesson that term, Miss Dubois began to read the exam results out to the class. Didn't you hate that moment where you get to hear everyone else's results?
Humiliation, you mean?
Thanks a lot, Miss Dubois and others. Teachers, don't do that. Fraser, you scored 72%, well done. MacDonald, you got 68%. Ross, you achieved a creditable 63%, should have done better. On and on she read them out, with most of the class sitting there with big smiles on their faces. I just kept my head down. Excuse me. Eventually she worked her way through the whole list with no mention of my name. She then said rather apologetically that for some unknown reason my exam paper had been lost in the system. Because of this, I would be awarded the county average of 43%. Result, I thought to myself, that'll do for me, that's a pass. By the time the exams came around again at the end of the year, I'd made up my mind that academia was not for me. I wanted to leave school and try my luck in the workplace. Before I left, I had another French exam to get through, and I repeated the disappearing test paper trick. Class got their results a few weeks later, and Miss Dubois commented how amazed she was that the same thing had happened to my exam paper. What are the chances of that? She pondered, but this time she didn't have that apologetic tone to her voice. I've spoken to the headmaster and we've arranged for you to resit the test. In fact, the classroom next door is empty now, so you can go and do the test right away. Salaud, I thought. Miss Dubois took me to the room next door, but because it was a French classroom, there were textbooks and charts I could have potentially used to cheat. So she brought in a sixth former called Duncan to supervise me. Duncan was the school's head prefect. He was the finest example of what the school stood for, clean-cut, clever and sporty. He was also, as it turned out, my brother's good mate. I started the test, but after 15 minutes of much head-scratching and pencil chewing, he asked me how I was doing and why I was doing this in the first place. I explained about the missing exam paper, omitting to tell him my part in its disappearance, and that it was the second time it had happened. He then asked what I was stuck on and offered to help. In short, he did pretty much all the test, telling me where to put my accents and how to expand my answers. When I finished, I gave the paper to Miss Dubois. I said, "It was hard, but I've done my best, miss." A week later, I had my last French lesson. Miss Dubois told me I'd scored 91%.
Wow.
I sheepishly replied that French had always been my favourite subject, and that I was sorry I was leaving the school as it meant I would not be able to continue learning French. She did not look convinced. Surprisingly, she was no fool. So, Father Simon, I don't seek forgiveness from Miss Dubois or the school, as I'm sure they were glad to see the back of me. However, I would like to seek some penance from my mum and dad, as they were incredibly proud of my exam result, especially since they didn't see me lift a French book in the entire 2 years I did the subject. But I think I should really seek forgiveness from the magnifique people of France. That was pathetic, Craig. In my youth, I thought so little of their language and culture that I didn't bother even trying to learn anything about it. I have since tried to rectify that. Okay, it's another cheating in school story.
Have you had a lot of these over the years?
Yes, we have had quite a few, particularly at exam time. Yeah, and I seem to remember Angus Deaton did a confession. When he was at Cambridge, he did German, and he had to do, I think it was 3 answers, and he looked at the paper and he could only do 1. So he filled an entire booklet of notes with 1 answer, and then wrote at the bottom, continued in another book, and then handed in just the 1, so that the examination authorities thought that they thought he'd done the whole lot, but they had lost the other 2 questions. So he got a first based on that one thing.
Oh.
Yeah. I mean, who'd have thought that?
Well, in the light of that, I think we can forgive Craig. If Angus Deaton's going to do something like that, then Craig, what you did was nowhere near as bad. I mean, this is just a case of being opportunistic, isn't it?
I think so.
Someone who struggled with academia themselves, I can identify with Craig. And exams can make your life hell. They really can. I just loathe exams. I think they put a lot of pressure on people. And so I can understand Craig completely, just kind of making the best of a situation, really, and just going, oh, that's the answer, is it? I'm writing it down. Fine by me, Craig.
Is that what you did?
Well, no, I didn't have a Duncan in my life. If I had, I would have taken the opportunity.
As I recall, one of the newspapers got in touch with Cambridge and said, did you know about Angus Deaton's confession? And they said they were pretty relaxed about it. I mean, it was like 20 years ago. Bobby, what do you say? What do you say to Craig?
I love Duncan as well, but the thing about Craig is the whole thing about French at school, it gives you at least the confidence that later on and you can go and get a cup of tea or a pint, because usually it's the basics and get your way to the railway station, and that's what you missed out on, so you cheated yourself, really. And I think that's the thing, is you cheated yourself and let yourself down. And there's also some magic at school that you can't see when you're younger. There's opportunities. So listen, I was the same. I struggled at school, hated every minute of it, but I'd wish I'd been able to see the magic.
There's all sort of magic at school. What are you talking about?
Well, there is, really.
Did you go to Hogwarts?
No.
Well, are you a wizard?
No, it's not that kind of magic. Anyway,
Wingardium Leviosa.
I'm going to forgive you, because I'd also feel your pain.
Wingardium Leviosa? We're just going through a series of spells here.
The Confessions Podcast.
That was Craig's confession. I get the cheaters feeling, where some French exam papers mysteriously disappeared into thin air. A confession that prompted a sultry soupçon of franglais from Monsieur Mayo.
Yeah, zut alors.
Is that I couldn't distinguish whether you said zut alors or...
I almost said something else, which is also French, but would have been inappropriate. Yes, and obviously you can't let that slip out. Although you probably could say it on a podcast. We have standards, and Bobby's looking at me in her moral compass kind of way.
I'm intrigued.
Still to come on this week's Confessions podcast, some pesky wasps make an appearance in the Confession from the Crypt. Out of the door came Roger, clad only in his shirt and jockstrap, screaming and shouting and seemingly hitting his jockstrap with one of his gloves.
You had me at jockstrap.
Thank you. You bet you've never said that before. So it's time, it's the sweet time where we head over to the parish notice board. Joe, why don't you start things off with the missing cat poster?
All right, then. So we have Joan Tucker, who's been in touch. And while her message is short, it's definitely sweet. It goes like this. Dear Father Simon and the Holy Collective, I live in the Bahamas and I listen to many, many BBC programmes and podcasts and I love them all. But the Confessions podcast is definitely in the top 5.
Top 5?
Not 3, you notice.
Yeah.
Or 1.
No. However, it's funny and it's refreshing. Much love to you all, Joan Tucker.
Well, thank you, Joan. And think, you enjoy it and you don't pay the licence fee. So, really, I think the least you could do is to make us number 1 just for 1 week. Bobby, what have you carelessly ripped from the notice board?
Well, we've had this through from Sarah and Anita. Hi, Simon, Bobby and Joe. A quick update on our car stickers. Anita has recently bought a new car and she was very concerned about losing her hard-earned drive time car sticker. Remember them? Fortunately, we were able to remove it and put it on the new car window. How's that for commitment to the podcast? And look, there is the picture that proves this happened. There's a photo of Anita looking very worried as she puts it on the window of her new car, deemed Ming the Merciless.
There's devotion for you.
Definitely. And it's the biggest Perth fan, Sarah and Anita. Perth, Scotland or Perth, Australia? I'd like to think Australia.
Let's have a look at the photograph. I'm sure we can tell from the photograph.
Well, it's bright and sunny. That could be Perth
That's
this year.
definitely Perth, Australia.
Yeah, it's the light.
Or it could have been Perth, Scotland on a sunny day.
Nah, Perth, Australia.
Is that what we're going for? Okay, I got this from Gina Riggs. Father Simon, the pastoral preachers, I'm not really sure how long I've been listening to the live confessions and podcasts, but it must have been at least 8 or 9 years from when I was about 12. Recently, I also forced 2 friends from university to listen. One of them liked it so much that she has subscribed to the podcast and has made it part of her evening routine to listen to the Confessions podcast. She is called Petra and is currently on her year abroad in Munich. Any chance you could give her a shout out and send her hugs from England to Munich? Okay, well, I think we can manage that, can't we?
Oh, yeah.
Petra, consider yourself hugged by all of us.
I was just debating how we send hugs, what a hug sounds like.
Well, I think it's in the... I don't know. She can probably feel it in her waters.
Can you feel it now?
No.
Can you feel the warmth coming out of you? Here's your big hug from us all.
You don't want to feel it in your waters. You want to feel like a big, shaggy dog, warm, hugging you, like a big bear. You don't want that in your waters, do you?
I don't want a bear hugging me either. Thank you very much. It might be the last thing that ever happens. Anyway, it says, we're missing Petra a lot and have been making regular Skype calls to keep in contact, but a shout out over the Confessions podcast would be extra special. Thank you from Emily and Gina. Thank you, Emily and Gina.
If you do want to get in touch with the podcast, don't forget, if you have a confession of your own, one that made you laugh out loud, really, really loudly, or you've just managed to sneakily subscribe one of your mates to the podcast and you want to boast, then it's email confessions@bbc.co.uk.
Yeah, and you haven't got long, basically.
No, you're running out of time.
Well, stocks last. Anyway, time for the grubby part of the notice board. It's time to see what non-compliant confessions we've received this week. Joe gets to go first.
Andrew is first in this roll call of shame with his very rough crossing confession, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, involves a case of seasickness, but also a fully cooked breakfast, big breakfast, dozens of passengers on the below deck, and the unwanted addition of bits of sausage to hair and clothing after Andrew's breakfast decided to make a reappearance.
Nice.
More bacon, anyone? Baked beans?
I'd have
egg.
enjoyed reading that one out. That would have been fun. Give a little warning for people who are eating. Kirky's tale is slightly less vomit-inducing and actually starts in a heartwarming way with a teacher reading a well-loved Roald Dahl tale to a bunch of 6-year-olds. Unfortunately, when you find out that Kirky got her words muddled up when reading this line from The Witches...
Go on.
I ran up the chef's trousers and clung to his sock. You realise why this didn't make the cut. Okay. I
Couldn't have done that, couldn't you?
Just had to concentrate. I think that, again, that's fine.
Bookending our X-rated section with bodily fluids is Mike's tale about a drunken party wandering into a friend's bathroom and deciding to top up a well-known yellow baby shampoo with something of a similar colour.
Yes.
No.
Anyway, moving on.
Well, we don't want to encourage any of those confessions at bbc.co.uk.
Why would you do that?
Because you're daft and unhelpful.
It's
And
also
drunk, probably.
different consistency, isn't it? That special yellow shampoo that doesn't make your eyes water for babies is completely different. It's visceral. It's,
Yeah, I
there's
think...
going to be separation. I'm thinking about this too much.
Yes, probably.
Let's just not think about it at all. It's time to get back to this week's confession. So we have Julie's tale next, and it's the fairy tale of Old York.
The Confessions Podcast.
Simon and the team of Forgivers. I'm a retired teacher with 40 weary years at the chalk face behind me. I loved that beautiful opening line. My guess is that Julie might have been an English teacher because you've got to grab them in the first line. I loved my teaching years, but I often think of a period during the 1970s when I and my co-conspirators behaved less than generously toward a fellow teacher whom I will call Julian. Picture, if you can, a Yorkshire coal mining town in 1976 where life was harsh and schools were definitely no place for the faint-hearted. The school in our town was a tough one, and a certain amount of bravery and optimism was needed to teach in it. The kids were unsophisticated and down-to-earth, but decent and good-natured, with a wicked sense of Yorkshire humour. When it came to the teachers, they took no prisoners. I think the scene is set. The start of a new term in 1976, we welcomed a new teacher from the south of England. This is Julian we're talking about. And Julian came to us with a mission, which was to use his progressive ideas and teaching methods to educate and civilise the wild people of the north and give us a taste of his higher culture. The kids found him a novelty at first, but they soon tired of repeating themselves as Julian wasn't great at understanding Yorkshire speak. And they certainly weren't impressed with his favoured approach of learning through the expressive arts, and he could regularly be seen in animated posture attempting to persuade groups of horrified teenagers to express their inner emotions through interpretive dance. That's never going to be a good idea.
Mr. G, I'm thinking of here.
Okay, that's good. He didn't fare much better with the staff either, most of whom were bemused by his endless belief in his ability to bring high culture to this mining community. Despite this, Julian decided it might be a good idea to befriend myself and a few other chosen staff and get to know us as colleagues in order to work on our obvious shortcomings as teachers. With this in mind, he informed us that he would like to join our regular Friday group of 8 to a local hotel for lunch, which, despite our excuses, he duly turned up for one fateful Friday. During the meal, I mentioned to Julian that there were luncheon vouchers available in school. You remember luncheon vouchers?
No.
Okay. They were vouchers. They were vouchers given out by employers, and that you could get for money off at lunch.
Okay.
That kind of
Like
thing.
green shield stamps.
Yeah, that goes
different.
back even further. But yes, these were luncheon vouchers for luncheon. That's the kind of thing. Anyway, they were available in school, but only a select few were allowed to use them. They were given at the discretion of the deputy head, I said. In fact, I'd actually made some pretend vouchers earlier. Not an easy task on the school's old ink stencil printer. And at the end of the meal, we used these to pay for our meals. Now, we were regular customers at the hotel, and the staff were only too pleased to play along as long as we paid with real cash a bit later. Julian was far from happy at being the only one seemingly paying for lunch, and he resolved to have this out with our world-weary deputy head, Arthur. There's a lot of world-weary teachers in this story. Now, Arthur was actually a good sport at heart, and so played along when Julian went to convince him that he was worthy of luncheon vouchers because of his work raising the cultural aspirations of the school. Arthur agreed and signed the vouchers so that the following Friday, Julian was able to use them to pay for his meal, which, of course, we had to cough up for secretly later. We were going to come clean the following week after pretending to know nothing at all about the vouchers, convincing Julian he'd imagined the whole thing. But unknown to us, he decided to use the vouchers to take his new young wife to said hotel one evening midweek for a romantic meal. The evening staff, however, had no knowledge of our ruse and were not impressed at the production of obviously fake vouchers. The prank may well have ended there, but unfortunately Julian had no cash to pay for the meals, and he was understandably enraged and also extremely embarrassed. He complained desperately to the hotel manager, who was having none of this far-fetched story from a man who was clearly not from round here, and he summoned the local constabulary to deal with this fraudulent counterfeiting case. It was sheer coincidence that the attending constable was my dashing young husband, Dave, who, of course, knew all about Julian and his southern softy ways.
No.
This is a sitcom, isn't it? Without giving us away, PC Dave was able to smooth the situation with the hotel manager, but gave Julian a stern warning about using full school dinner vouchers to treat his lovely wife, and insisted that Julian leave items of jewellery and his new wife in the hotel as security until he returned later with payment. Needless to say, the following Monday, we were all summoned to the office of the headmistress, where we were definitely on the naughty table and banned from leaving premises at lunchtime for the foreseeable future. Julian gave up on us shortly after that, saying that we were beyond help. He returned to his roots, where he delighted in teaching the expressive arts in an exclusive fee-paying school full of appreciative pupils. A classic 70s teaching story from a mining town in Yorkshire. But Julie is obviously now feeling that maybe she was a little bit bad. She and her friends were a little bit bad to poor Julian, who was only doing his best. Young Joe.
I think this is dreadful. I'm not going to forgive this one, I don't think, because it's kind of bullying. Or am I just being really petty about this?
It's entirely down
And
to
also,
you.
did the constable make him leave his wife and the jewellery at the hotel? I'm sure that's what you said.
Yes, that's
he
what
had
it
to
says.
leave his wife behind.
The items
Get
of
out
jewellery
here.
and his wife for security.
Oh dear. No, I mean, Julian was trying his very best. He was trying really hard to fit in. He couldn't help where he came from, and obviously he was a progressive teacher and he wanted to express himself in certain ways. If it didn't go down well, that's not his fault. So no, I think it was really harsh on him, and I'm not going to forgive.
Okay. Young Bobby.
Yeah, I was stuck on the wife and jewellery. Was his wife not enough?
Was the
if you
jewellery
live in
not
your
enough?
wife, well, the thing is your wife. Look, I mean, that's ridiculous. But again, I think it's a little bit unfair and short-sighted. It's easy to make fun of the one that's different, and of course, that's what school is not about. You're meant to be inclusive and supportive. So I understand kind of the teasing, but really, it's not. You're not forgiven.
I'd love to know.
Having said that, can I just add this? Julian, I suppose this was in a time before you could get those vouchers off the internet and go to any high street kind of pizza place and do 2 for 1.
1976, I think so, yeah.
So early days.
All right.
Not forgiven.
No, so when you were telling that story, I was desperately racking my brain trying to think. So Mr. G is a character from Summer Heights High. I don't know if people know Summer Heights High. And that's how I imagine Julian was. Something of a Mr. G. Or maybe John Barrowman. If anyone's been watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of It. John he speaks, but he sings more than anything.
The Confessions Podcast.
Okay, so gather around. Here comes another confession, which I have to say is going to introduce you also to our guests who we're going to be speaking to later on in the programme, who are Jason Hazley and Joel Morris, who are the guys who thought up the wonderful world of Ladybird book for grown-ups. Hello, Jason, and hello, Joel.
Hello.
Hello.
And they're sharing a microphone, which accounts for their slightly odd delivery there.
Does it really, though?
It's to avoid spreading colds. We'll lean in alternately.
That's right. That's the way it is. Anyway, so the reason that we asked you just to come in a little bit early is because this confession is the only one that we've ever received, and it came in just a couple of days ago, that's about a Ladybird book.
Ah.
So it seemed to be fortuitous, so we thought we'd get you involved.
Always wanted this.
So tonight's tale comes from Elaine. Elaine, thank you very much for this confession. Dear Father Simon, this is a confession about sibling rivalry, the 70s, and Ladybird books, as well as being a tale regarding learning about grown-up stuff. It begins one day on a dreary afternoon in autumn 1972, when I was 10, and leafing through children's books in my big brother John's room. I came across the Ladybird Book of Your Body. And Ladybird books, as I'm sure many listeners will remember, were brilliant. Plenty of pictures, good explanation, and easy to read. Can I just ask Jason and Joel, do you know this one?
I think we've used illustrations from this book.
Lady-
I certainly
Carefully. We've
Yes.
carefully used them.
I think I used one in the zombie apocalypse.
Okay,
Yes.
right. What made this book even more interesting was that, as well as describing about how your body worked, on the inside back cover, there were line drawings of a family, boy, girl, man, lady, all standing and looking as though they were happily talking to each other, with the noticeable difference that they were all naked. A standard family gathering, except that no one was wearing any clothes. Now, this was a good distraction for a pre-teen, but as I carefully scanned the images, I couldn't help but notice that all around the naked lady's curves, there were deep grooves, such as made by a pencil, through tracing paper, outlining her shape. I puzzled on this for a while, but then heard the sound of my brother coming up the stairs to his room. Quickly, I put the book back on his desk before he came in, snarling in his usual brotherly concern, "What are you doing in my room?" And I quickly fled. Our house was in an L shape, with the bathroom being at right angles to my brother's room. Once I heard him slam his door, I crept into the bathroom, locked the door quietly, and very carefully stood on the loo seat to open the little high-frosted glass window so I could spy into his room. Through the gap in the open window, I was able to make out my brother sat at his desk by his window. Pencil in hand and tongue between his teeth, he was concentrating on carefully tracing around the picture of the naked lady in the Ladybird book. Oh, the joy I felt at having caught him in this act of depravity. To get one up on your big brother is a rare treat, and I snickered to myself at my exciting discovery. My brother traced 3 outlines of said lady, and then, in a secretive way, folded them carefully and placed them into his pocket. He stood up and left his room, and I heard his footsteps going down the stairs. Giving him a few minutes, I stealthily closed the window, came out of the bathroom and crept after him as he went out of the front door. Breathless with excitement and glee, I followed him at a distance, being careful to keep out of sight. My brother went across the road and round the corner where he met his friend, Philip. A furtive exchange took place. A coin. I'm pretty sure it was a 2-pence piece, in return for a folded piece of paper. Looking all around him, I think it's breach of copyright. Looking all around him, my brother nodded at Philip, who made off back into his house. I remained hidden, grinning in delight at my detective work. So for the next few days, I took an illicit thrill in spying on my brother as he continued in his entrepreneurial artistry, selling pictures of the Ladybird lady to his friends for 2p a copy. At meal times, he would sometimes catch me smiling enigmatically at him. "What are you grinning at, stupid?" he'd say, lovingly. However, all good things must come to an end, and one fateful day I crept into the bathroom and locked the door, ready for more espionage. I stepped onto the loo seat as usual and reached up to open the little high window. And then disaster struck. I hadn't realised that the window had been prepared ready for decorating, and my dad had unscrewed the hinges. As I pushed the handle, the whole window disappeared out into the air, leaving me frantically clutching the handle to stop it falling and shattering on the ground below. I shrieked as I stood there on the loo seat, trapped in the locked bathroom, with my arm out in the air, desperately holding on to the detached window. With that, my brother looked up from his tracing, saw my horrified face through the gap where the window had been, and quickly deducing that I'd been spying on him, gave me a look of pure and utter loathing. Meanwhile, my dad had leapt upstairs 2 at a time and was hammering on the bathroom door and hollering at me for stupidly opening the window and shouting, "Don't dare drop it!" I did manage to extract myself from the window. Shakily, I got down from the loo seat and unlocked the bathroom door to face the wrath of my father. Hey, this is the 70s. Children always wrong. Behind him, my brother was grinning smugly at my predicament and making slitting throat signs the way brothers do to indicate what would happen if I told our dad what he'd been up to. So there it is. I don't seek forgiveness from my brother for getting a huge amount of glee from spying on him. Back then, we treated each other with a mutual loathing, though I'm pleased to say we're best of friends now. Nor from my dad for potentially wrecking the start of his DIY project in the bathroom. But I asked forgiveness from all my brother's young teenage friends, as once he realised I'd sussed him out, my brother ceased his artistic endeavours, and they were thus deprived of the rather innocent copy of the Ladybird Lady for 2p. This book is still at my parents', and you can still make out the trace lines on the back inside cover. Well, it's tonight's confession came from Elaine. It's the first Ladybook story. We'll come to the Ladybird guys in just a moment. Joe Wiley going first.
I think it's all about them and their reaction, don't you? Would never pretend to know how boys work, teenage boys work, or even prepubescent teenage boys work, rather. I'm gonna pass it over to Jason and Joel for the verdict on this one.
Okay.
I like the tone it's got of a particularly sort of innocent episode of The Wire, where they're sort of busting a nascent pornography racket. It's quite. It's got all the feeling of a sort of there's surveillance. It's quite an exciting story. I enjoyed the narrative.
Do you forgive Joel?
I suppose I forgive the brother. He's only doing what people do in art classes. It's fine to
breaking
learn to draw.
Breaking copyright.
Obviously, the copyright infringement's a whole different issue. You'll have to talk to Penguin Random House's lawyers about that. But I think that they're friends now.
Yes. Okay.
So I think this is a victimless crime.
Jason.
I'm with Joel. I think it is a victimless crime. I do want to know, though, how, from standing at the window, holding the window in her hand, having locked the bathroom door, how she was rescued. Who rescued Elaine? Did you? Because you can't bring the window back in through the window, can you? Because it's the same size as the window.
I think that's what she must have done. I think she must have kind of twisted it and pulled it back in.
Do you think?
Because she would have had to unlock the door.
This is
Anyway.
true, unless the door was kicked in which case then there's now there is a victim in this crime, and it's the door.
But all things considered, forgiven or not?
Forgiven,
Okay.
absolutely.
Probably prior.
Well, I think this is before the days of the Grattan catalogue, so
Yeah.
the opportunities were limited for
Tracing.
for tracing opportunities. Yes, definitely, that's the word. And he was only selling his art. Really, it was his work. There was
Stolen
there was a
art,
step. Well, maybe borrowed from.
Van Gogh didn't sell a single work in his lifetime, so this is obviously could be the beginning of a great career.
And he was saying
He may
industrious
now be an
making money.
experienced forger.
The thing is you should never spy in someone's bedroom because you're never going to see something you like. I think that's
quite likely.
Yeah, I think that's the thing you should to take away from this, Elaine. And also I think the window opened into his bedroom. I think that's the thing about where it fitted.
Oh, right.
So it was like to let the light through into the other room. I think that's what happened. So
It's a lantern.
Is that what it's called?
A little light.
Forgiveness or not, Bobby, would you say?
Yes, forgiven.
The Confessions Podcast.
A confession from Elaine there, which we called The First Time I Ever Saw Your Trace. And if you missed the confession going out live, then you wouldn't have heard the reaction on the people's verdict. So here is another chance to hear one of our favourite responses. Shane from Dorset, absolutely not forgiven for depriving all those poor lads of their teenage kicks. Lucy, brilliant, forgiven. Siblings spying, a rite of passage. My brother was quite keen on a Littlewoods catalogue in the 1980s. Obviously, the lingerie section. Oh, God.
Really? That was very interesting, I think. Why are you looking at me like that?
I was just thinking, it can be educational, can't it?
What, the Littlewoods catalogue?
Especially, the thermal. There'll always be the thermal clothing section.
There was always thermal leggings, thermal vests.
Yeah.
Gentlemen standing with hands on hips, ladies standing with hands on hips.
Very practical.
Yeah.
Very much different times, isn't it? Really? You got excited about a Littlewoods catalogue with thermal underwear?
Well, there are other pages.
Or the lingerie
less clothing,
pages?
yeah.
And the shower pages?
The shower pages.
Yeah, you could buy...
Sorry, Simon, what's that?
You could buy like a shower. So there are people in the shower.
Just you.
How many people? There was
never
always
guys.
one person. It wasn't ever two people in the shower, was there? It was nothing like
No, it
that.
was always a young person. Looking, hey, look how nice it is to have a shower.
With clothes on?
Although clearly there's no water.
Or hands in the air.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know where that memory came from. I can only apologise.
Can you put it back away there now, please?
Okay, certainly. Anyway, that's it from this week's batch of confessions. Send yours while you still have time. confessions@bbc.co.uk. First of all, though, before we finish, or last of all, I should say, it's time to dig out a confession from the crypt.
And this one has been requested by Chris from Liverpool, who says, Dear Simon, Joe and Bobby, I would like to request a confession, which has always stuck in my mind. It's a classic prank, gone wrong, but it had horrendous consequences. If memory serves correctly, it involves some jam and a men's changing room. I particularly remember it because I was stuck in stop-start traffic around Manchester when it was on. With my feet firmly stuck on the pedals, I wasn't able to cross my legs when I heard what happened. Could you please fish it out to see if it is still as awful as I remember? Thanks, Chris.
All right, Chris, thank you very much indeed. Just for you, this is the confession we called Nobody Buzz It Better.
The Confessions Podcast.
Dear Father Simon and the Learning Collective, I humbly seek forgiveness for an incident that took place during the glorious summer of 1981. I had just finished my O-levels and was due to join the army. My last summer as a boy was filled with watching Ian Botham destroy the Australians in the Ashes. It laid the foundations for my own cricket team's most successful summer ever, but also led me to commit a heinous act against my chum, Roger. Roger was someone who I looked up to. He was dashingly handsome, clever, popular, and most of all, the best player in our team. I don't like him.
Hate him already, don't you?
He always topped both the batting and bowling averages and was the team captain. There was nothing he couldn't do. Score a 50, take 5 wickets, hold a stunning catch, and he would do all this with a shake of his blonde hair and square jaw. Anyway, you get the picture. Here's the confession. I was not, says Stan, the best batsman, but I had been practising furiously to improve, and to my and no doubt several others' amazement, our coach had said I would be opening the batting with Roger in the forthcoming cricket festival. The day arrived. It was a glorious sunny and warm day, and Roger won the toss and strode back to the changing room, making a batting gesture. We were going to bat first, he had decided. I put my pads on, put my box into my pants, and put on my gloves. Roger put on his pads and gave me a sort of a condescending pep talk. Listen for my calls, he said. Play your shots. Remember to call loudly. He then took his jockstrap out of his bag. Roger didn't put his box into his pants like us mere mortals. No, it was sewn inside his jockstrap. Quite why this was fascinating, I don't know. But as we walked to the middle, I found myself frantically adjusting my box and thinking I might just get one of these jockstrap thingies in time for the next game. People are reassured that Confession is back on familiar ground here.
So is this a key element?
Yes, it is.
I don't understand. I feel
in
at a bit of a disadvantage here because I have no idea about the logistics of all
I'll show
this.
you later.
Okay.
No, I don't think you will. It's a bit of plastic protection for sensitive areas.
Right. Well, how is that different from the box?
No, the box is the protection.
Oh, I see. Okay. And any other thing?
The jockstrap holding. Mike.
The jockstrap is like your underwear, but holding the box.
Okay,
in
got it.
place.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, all clear. We'll put an illustration on our Facebook page later.
Twitter.
Roger took guard and the bowler came running in and bowled the ball. Roger swiped and edged it past the slips for an opening boundary. Smiling, he winked at me. That's how it's done, Stan, he said smugly. The bowler came hurtling in again, and this time Roger played a forward defensive prod. The ball rolled away from him and I shouted, "No!"
Oh.
Meaning no run.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And turned back to my crease. Roger, however, had decided to ignore my call.
no.
And bellowed, "No, run!" I turned and seeing him running towards me did the gentlemanly thing and started running too. Now, I'm no slouch between the wickets, but the fact that the fielder already had the ball in his hand should have been a giveaway. Yes. I carried on running. The fielder lobbed the ball to the wicket-keeper, who took the bails off with a loud, "How's that?" The umpire's finger was up before I'd even reached the crease, Father Simon. I was out without facing a ball. I hung my head in shame as I trudged off. I heard Roger say, "Sorry, old chum, if you hadn't hesitated, you might just have made it." Ugh. Well, as you can imagine, I was seething mad. Roger went on to make yet another big score, and when he finally came off for tea, we were handily placed at 190 for 3. I was still sulking in the changing room when our star player came in. He and Tommy Taylor were sharing a laugh and carried on as if I wasn't there. They removed their pads and trousers and other items to put on their shorts for tea. We just lightened it a little as we gone through.
Other item.
Tea was a lovely spread, the usual array of sandwiches, crisps and savoury snacks. This day was a little special, though, as we also had some scones, complete with strawberry jam and cream. Now, I don't know why, Father Simon, or even where the idea came from, but I found myself smearing strawberry jam with whipped cream into Roger's box, which I had discovered could be removed from the jockstrap. Hastily putting it back into his bag, I dutifully went outside to finish my orange squash. I hope you're all following this. Tea was finished, and what happened next went down in the annals of club history. Roger went back to get changed again, and I rather smugly smiled to myself as I thought of him getting jam stuck onto his whites, that kind of thing. But instead, there came from the changing room what could only be described as a blood-curdling scream, and another, and another. People were looking round anxiously. Our coach started to walk towards the changing room when out of the door came Roger, clad only in his shirt and jockstrap, screaming and shouting and seemingly hitting his jockstrap with one of his gloves. He ran around like a man possessed, all the time screaming and beating at his jockstrap. Coach chased after him and eventually brought him down with a textbook rugby tackle. By now I was getting a little concerned. Was he somehow allergic to jam and cream? Coach was now struggling furiously to remove Roger's jockstrap, as this seemed to be the cause of the problem. I was now frantic with worry. Had this joke gone horribly wrong? It transpired that Roger wasn't allergic to jam and cream. He was, however, somewhat allergic to the 3 wasps that had thought it was their lucky day and decided to sample the jam and cream in his box. When he pulled on his jockstrap, he disturbed the trio of wasps who were not happy and decided to sting him many times over. Poor Roger was led away by our coach and taken to A&E, where he was treated for wasp stings to his sensitive areas. He wasn't able to play any of the remaining games in the festival, but we still managed to win, and I made my first ever 50. So, Father Simon, forgiveness please. Not for the deed, because he really had it coming, but from the poor nurses at A&E, who were presented with poor, swollen and bruised Roger, and had to remain professional rather than falling off their chairs laughing, which is what I still do when I recount this story occasionally. And also from our coach, who never really recovered from the tackle that he had to make to bring young Roger down. Well, I think Roger being taken down is a peg or two is a theme running through this tale. Wasps and strawberry cream and jockstraps. What more could you want
That's
for a
pretty
summer
horrific,
confession?
isn't it?
It is
That's
really, yes.
I mean, he could actually have done some long-term damage there. Luckily, he didn't. I'm assuming he didn't. 'cause
He
didn't
just put the jam and cream.
He just put the jam and cream in. But yeah, what actually happened was awful. However, it was unintended, and as you have implied, Roger did need to be taken down a peg or two. So yeah, I think Stan was understandably furious by the way he'd been battered out. Is that the right way to say it, Mike?
No, run out.
Run out. There you go. So I'm going to forgive you, Stan.
Batted out.
Oh, come on.
Deadly
Give me some
Dean,
slack.
Dean of Deadliness.
Well, it's a tricky one, this, in a way, isn't it? But, I mean, he's asking for forgiveness from the nurses and the coach, isn't he? And they weren't directly affected anyway, and nurses do that sort of thing. They help people get back to normal. And the coach probably had a good laugh anyway, because he, too, may not have liked Roger. So I forgive as well. I didn't like Roger, did you?
I think we instantly took against him.
Yes, I think so.
But let's see what Voice of Sport says. Mike, what do you think?
I'm in agreement with Sister Rebecca. I think that Roger did need to be taken down a peg or two. And I think Stan was in the right to say no run.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, technical.
Oh, I see.
I like that.
So I am forgiving him.
Okay. All right, so this is it's people's verdict time. You remember how this goes. So do you forgive Stan or not for this incident? I thought, as I was reading through, what used to happen with incidents like this is there'd be chili powder involved, and that wouldn't be forgivable, and that's not that's not a good thing. But because it ended up with wasps,
unforeseen wasps,
absolutely, I think that might be forgivable.
The Confessions Podcast.
And that was your confession from the crypt this week from Stan. Nobody Buzz It Better, featuring Sister Rebecca, and Alan Dedicoat was in there, the Dean of Deadliness, making a surprise appearance there. And Brother Mike.
Was Rebecca genuinely that innocent, or was she playing naive, do you think?
I think she's, like all of us, it's like an exaggeration of herself.
Okay, she just wanted to make you squirm.
And also, she asked the questions that lots of us needed to know at the time, I guess. And we're too shy to ask.
Yeah.
Too shy, hush, hush, eye to eye. What a classic that was. One of Joe's favourites.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. If you have a request for a vintage confession, as Simon said, not much time left, then send over the details that you do remember to confessions@bbc.co.uk and we'll try our best to dig it out of the crypt.
And if you made it to the end of the last podcast, we asked you to tweet the phrase Spanky wants a biscuit, which will make no sense if you missed last week. But anyway, that's the way it went. Thanks to Michelle Robinson, Dan Banks, Lynn Jackson, all the others who tweeted that and probably enjoyed tweeting it as well. This week's code phrase is going to be decided by Joe Wiley.
It's either whipped cream in Roger's box or it's the naked ladybird lady. Bobby, what do you reckon?
I'm happy with either of those.
Me too. I think we go with naked ladybird lady.
Okay, let's do that. Naked ladybird lady.
Okay, so that's the thing that you have to get in touch with. So if you tweet us, it's the naked ladybird lady.
Yeah, and don't forget all your confessions, send them through to confessions@bbc.co.uk.
And subscribe to the Confession Podcast, and you can hear the show for the next few weeks from 5 p.m. weekdays on Radio 2. Thank you for being there.
The Confessions Podcast. Go in peace.
Hello, it's Ken Bruce from The Ken Bruce Show on BBC Radio 2, the home of Popmaster. Do you love a quiz? Do you know your music? Do you know your Dolly Parton from your Dua Lipa? Your Status Quo from your Simple Minds? Your Ed Sheeran from your Electric Light Orchestra? Well, if you do, I think you're going to love the Popmaster podcast, which is available now. It's your chance to hear our daily music quiz from our weekday morning show, where we test your pop knowledge over the last 50 years. To make sure you don't miss an episode, subscribe to the Popmaster podcast on the BBC Sounds app. You know you want to.
Listen to more podcasts from Radio 2 by downloading the BBC Sounds app.